Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. This is DV LeBron. Today I have a special guest, the Chief of Police for Midlothian, Mr. Carl Smith. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate you helping me. We had some technical difficulties, and the chief has been very gracious. So, Chief, I wanted to get into it. I wanted to talk to you because right now there's budgets going on all over Ellis County. All the different government entities are going through it, and I wanted to kind of talk on that and general policing within the city. Um, but there's been a lot of new people that have moved here, a lot of new houses and stuff. So people may not know who you are. Can you go ahead and tell them about you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a native Texan. I was born in Oak Cliff, Texas, back in 1964, in the prior century. I grew up in the Ovilla, the Duncanville Ovilla area. I went to school in Duncanville for the first 5 years. Moved to Ovilla. I went to school to Midlothian for 3 years, and then Ovilla, as you might know, is split between Midlothian and Red Oak ISD school districts. My dad was able to build a second house in a new subdivision in Ovilla. We moved there, and I ended up graduating from Red Oak. Ended up going to UTA for a little while. That didn't work out. I was working for Minyard Food Stores, for those of you that remember that chain from the Oak Cliff, Dallas, Fort Worth area for several years. And decided to go into law enforcement because of the influence of several people who worked for us overnight there as off-duty police officers. Began that career in 1987 with the city of DeSoto. While I was working there, I got my undergraduate from DBU and my graduate from Sam Houston State. Along the way, met my wonderful wife, Ginger. We started dating in 1990, got married in 1992. So we're celebrating 30 years of marriage this year. We moved to some family land in Midlothian in 1996. We were able to move into a home that after being gifted a couple of acres in the Mountain Peak area, and have lived there since. So I did 20 years with the city of DeSoto, rose through the ranks, worked in several areas, primarily investigations, spending 13 years in juvenile investigations, and then was promoted to assistant chief in 2002. In 2007, came to Midlothian. In fact, this is my 15th year with Midlothian. Started in July of 2007, and have just really been blessed by this opportunity and calling Midlothian Ellis County my hometown, or home.
Can you tell me a little bit about the personnel, just kind of how Midlothian PD is kind of set up?
When I came to Midlothian in 2007, we had just, or they had just went through a kind of a tumultuous transition. So I came in at the end of an investigation into the inner workings of the department. It wasn't about the officers themselves, but more the leadership. And so we were looking for a significant change. And one of the things that I would tell you represent the change that we've instituted is our motto. It's service above self, that we proudly display on our vehicles, and in our vision statements and other things that really bring the officers, when they enter the organization, understand that we have a partnership with our community, and that we believe that we're truly public servants and serve at the will of our community. That comes with it a commitment to sacrifice, and that's displayed through working shift work in the heat. I don't know if you've ever been on a highway when it's 110 outside, but that highway is probably about 135 or 40. Directing traffic takes someone who's willing to stay in the game and not give up because it's difficult. So I think we have a group of officers that are committed to our community. We have a unique mix. We have several long-term Midlothian residents that have graduated from Midlothian High, have come back to live in Midlothian after graduating, and then we have staff that live in Midlothian, have their kids in Midlothian School District. So that mix really brings a personal perspective to law enforcement, because we're not just working at a job, we're protecting our hometown.
Yeah, and it's good to have a police force that is close to their community. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about budgets because, they're going on. They're being done right now. What are some of the requests that you had this year, and what are the things that you would like to see going forward?
Well, every year, we do an officer allocation study. where we look at the call load that we're under, and we try to determine what the best mix of officers, not only just patrol officers, but the specialty position, like our traffic positions, our school resource officers, our investigative staff, and then the equipment we provide. There are several things that we're bringing to council's attention this year, not only additional staff that we feel we need based on the call load in order to keep up with our growth. As you said, we have a lot of new community members, a lot of new citizens that have moved to Midlothian and in Ellis County that frequent Midlothian. So we see that on a daily basis. We've gone from just around 50 square miles and 11,000 people when I first joined the department to 64 square miles and about 40,000 residents. And then our school district serves a larger population. And we have, in this year's mix, we've asked for 2 additional SROs. And we've asked for additional patrol staff that we feel are necessary so that we can continue to train well and support the officers on the street based on the call load. We're looking at more technology, an upgrade to our body-worn camera systems. We're looking at an upgrade in our computer-aided dispatch center that allows us to generate more stats that are important for how we allocate our officers on a daily basis. So there is a lot more science that goes into the art of police work than most people realize. The largest budget implication was passed by the voters just about 2 years ago in November. It's the $51 million public safety courts building that we're under schematic design now and hopefully looking to break ground by March of 23. So there are a lot of things going on within the organization that keep our staff busy.
Tentatively, where is it going to go in this new police headquarters?
So the station or the land that was acquired in the original purchase back in 2004-05 from First Baptist Church included almost 6 acres of land. So we have quite a bit of land to the north of the main building. The new facility will take up most of the existing parking and the green space that we've been taking care of. There are quite a few trees out there. It's reminiscent of a park because we like to keep our property clean, but that's where the new station will be. We were able to acquire a little bit of land from our neighbors, about 2 acres of total property to square out some of the parking needs that we have. So it's going to be a 2-story facility. It's about 74,000 square feet. It will be a stately site. I think our citizens will like not only be drawn to the building, but will appreciate the professional look that it presents.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's going to be one heck of a building. Chief Smith, let's get to the streets.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, Midlothian has grown quite a bit, and there's a lot of new houses. Tell me about some of the challenges that this growth is presenting to the department.
Well, it's Midlothian is 65 square miles, but it has nearly 40 linear miles of high-speed roadways when you consider 1387, FM 663, FM 875, 287, and Highway 67. The interstates, you're coming into town are 70 miles an hour on the 67 side, 60 miles an hour as you come in from Waxahachie, and it's upwards of 65 coming in from the west. So those high-speed roadways are challenges for us, and as our population grows, those become more congested. We know, if you've been around town, you know that 14th was recently completed to give us a full north-southwest and south opportunity to travel, thoroughfare rather. 663 continues to become more congested, and as they build more homes, not only within Midlothian to the south, but outside our jurisdiction, that's going to impact both 14th and 663, McAlpin Road, and into the north, 1387. Walnut Grove is under construction. We'll be widening it soon. Mockingbird Lane. All of these roadways are part of the major concern on a daily basis because we have so many people coming into the community, for school purposes, and then leaving the community to work elsewhere. And so that's a major concern for us. That's not the criminal side. That's just dealing with the traffic safety aspect of that. We actually make several arrests on a weekly basis for DWI or DUI, driving while intoxicated or under the influence of a narcotic or something else, of other intoxicating substances. So our evening traffic is equally challenging. We're very blessed because of the nomenclature of our community. It doesn't open itself up for the ease of what we would call burglary of residence or theft from construction sites. We have not seen a lot of that. We haven't seen that growth keep up with our numbers of citizens, thankfully. What we do see grow on a regular basis are the burglary of vehicles that continue to plague different neighborhoods at night. So many of them are just open doors, and they forget to bring their jewelry or their computers or wallets or medication in from at night, and our actors, if you will, just check door handles and are very, very good at finding not only valuables but also weapons. People carry weapons in their vehicles, and we lose about half of the car vehicle burglaries end up having a weapon stolen as well, and that's pretty alarming when you think about a weapon that could be used in other criminal episodes. Domestic violence or disturbances, where we have what the penal code defines as a family or people who live together fall underneath that category, and we're seeing an increase in that. So a lot of things add to that. The inflation we're currently experiencing, the heat will do that. Money is one of the most detrimental problems to a relationship that individuals experience. So all, as you said before, all the factors or catalysts are here, and they're just one argument away from being touched off.
Yeah, you have to fuel the air, and
yes.
he's just ready to go.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that we deal a lot with is the emotional or mental health issues. We see quite a bit of that each week. We even formed a team to deal with those folks, community members that deal with emotional illness, mental illness on a weekly basis. We check on them. We have a database of about 160 individuals that live in our city that this team checks on regularly to make sure that they're taking their medication, or if they need a ride to the hospital or a doctor, we're there to assist them. So
I was going to ask you about that, Chief, because it's been a major problem in the U.S. Mental health, it's happening. There's a lot of, like, just recently, a congressman got attacked by a vet that was not right, and there's several instances where homeless people with mental issues have hurt people, and you're saying we're experiencing that kind of thing going here. How are your officers trained to deal with recognizing that this is a mental thing, not so much a criminal thing? Or maybe it is a criminal thing, but it's primarily a mental thing. Yeah, are they identified to work with that?
Yes, there are several opportunities. Our licensing agency, TCOL, mandates a certain level of education for your basic certificate, your intermediate certification, and your advanced. But then we can go a step beyond that and have officers designated as the title is mental health peace officer. And we are trying to staff. We'd like to get the entire organization through that type of training, but to date we have several sergeants, corporals. Our primary trainers are corporals, and then several officers have been through that as well. So we have 1 to 2, at times there could be 3 officers that have that training on staff. Our crisis intervention unit is available on call 24/7. So if we have a situation they're not familiar with, we even have a volunteer therapist, licensed counselor that comes in and helps diagnose some of those things, an issue if it's beyond what the officers are comfortable with. But the tool we use most often is a document that allows the officer, as the really one of the only officials in the state of Texas that can detain someone who is a risk to themselves based on their mental and emotional capacity. And we take that, when we have that document filled out by an officer who views the incident, we can transport those individuals to a licensed hospital that deals with that type of issue, the mental health. We can even take them Methodist once they open their doors and they have we do have opportunity to take them there if they have a medical procedure or medical issue in addition to the mental issue going on. So as Ellis County grows, so do the resources, but primarily most of our resources are outside of Ellis County, and we have there are contractual agreements between the county and those hospitals to provide those services.
Now, there is a difference when dealing with the mental health of an adult and dealing with a child that has mental health issues or under 18. Are the officers trained differently to deal with that? Because there is, like, the mental health crisis and not missing our children, unfortunately.
We have a team that works within the school district. Commander Hicks and Sergeant Halbert and other officers who are school resource officers are trained in a risk analysis, and some of that, the emotional and the psychological issues are factors in those risk analysis they perform within the school district. So there's a twofold answer to your question. Is there are components within the training to identify the type of emotional distress, or for instance, if we have a child that's on the spectrum of autism, there is training for that. There's a new course that was placed into our academy curriculum several years ago, and we actually have a relationship through the academy with with a group out of Fort Worth that teaches autism recognition. And we have that expert on tap to come in and actually do some more training with our staff. But they get that early recognition through the basic Peace Officers Academy. So they're able to realize we're dealing with someone with autism or Asperger's. And our school resource officers are also very good and trained to recognize those issues.
That's fantastic, Chief. Anytime you're dealing with children, it can be a tricky thing. Right. One of the things that happened in this country was that there was a deep look into how policing deals with people from different cultures and backgrounds. After the George Floyd thing, as a law enforcement officer, we all felt it. There was something happening there. Midlothian and Waxahachie kind of did better than a lot of places. There wasn't anybody tearing stuff up, really. We kind of came together as a community. But as chief, what are your thoughts on that? And what have you done since then? What kind of steps have you taken in the department to kind of recognize some of those grievances?
Well, when an event like of that magnitude occurs, and it really takes the country, really shocks the conscience, not only of our community members, but of law enforcement professionals. It was one of the first times as organizational administration that you saw chiefs of police really express their concern, contempt for that type of display of callousness in prior to an investigation being completed or a court hearing being completed. The issues that we saw in that event are things we've trained and hopefully educated against for years. The idea of bias policing has been something we've dealt with and addressed from the state level since the 90s when we started passing racial profiling laws, where we've been regulated and required by state legislation to evaluate the daily activities of our officers. And the advent of more mobile cameras, the body-worn camera technology, the wide-angle lens that we use on all our squad cars, drones, those are tools we use to confirm the actions of the officers into scenes. They are a reminder of the officers that they're conscious reminders of the officers that their actions are being recorded, and hopefully reminders that help them hold the professional line. Now, from the very beginning of a recruitment endeavor for us, not only we do an in-depth background into a person's actions and activities prior to wanting to become a police officer. We do a psychological evaluation as well looking into anger issues, emotional strengths, emotional immaturity, and try to put the most well-adjusted person in uniform we can. And through the field training process, we emphasize the idea that we, as public servants, are going to serve everyone equally, as not based on their culture, not based on their perspectives of religion, their government, or their political ideals, or their gender identification, or anything of that nature. We're here to serve our community to the best of our ability, to the individual, and I believe firmly that has been embedded in our officers' perspective. And if you ask any of them, they believe that is one of our core values, that we treat people fairly. And while we recognize that bias, there's a term called implicit bias. We're all born with biases. We have to recognize that, and we have to learn, become acquainted with men and women, and children, and families of different cultural backgrounds, if we're ever hope to have any type of understanding. And that's one thing that I think a lot of law enforcement was able to do. Actually, the community reached out to us after the Floyd incident, and since that time, we have really had, I personally have developed several strong relationships with community members that have different cultural backgrounds, and we continue those relationships and friendships today. And that's it's you hate for that kind of blessing to come from an incident of that magnitude, but it's a blessing nonetheless, and we'll continue to learn from those events.
As far as if there's violence in the or if there has to be violence, if you have to escalate, and is there a matrix, or is there something like, if an officer has to use deadly force, mm-hmm. is there kind of a scale or kind of thing you want to tell the public, or is there like a committee that reviews it?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, the use of force, unfortunately, the laws that mandate officers to detain people, the language is such that it's a mandate. But we also have come into an age where officers are required and encouraged to use common sense, and not engage in times where it's going to artificially escalate a situation. And twofold. One is you can by your actions as an officer in playing into a bad situation, and an upset resident, driver, whatever it may be, even someone who's committed a minor offense, that if that is going to escalate and continue to escalate, there are several options. One, most times we can put off a detention until another time when we have an advantage, or when the situation has de-escalated. I can tell you that if we encounter someone that has a theft, and there are multiple challenges physically, with multiple children, whatever that might be, we're going to make a decision that advantages not only our organization from not having to deal with a public health issue in our jail, or a crisis with family services from the state level, but it goes the same way with when we know we're going to have to use force to detain someone. The officers will typically bring in additional staff, and that seems, and then again, there are going to be people who argue that more people show up, the more escalation it is. Well, if we have to make a detention, there's no option, then we want numbers on our side, and we will use that to hopefully de-escalate the situation and not have to put an officer or an individual at risk of being injured. Now, there are times that we have where officers are in foot pursuit with individuals who committed a felony, and they are trying to evade, and we again are required to make those types of detentions. They will give it their best effort to make that detention without obviously hurting themselves, without hurting someone. And so again, it goes back to a good level of common sense of when to make arrests that have options attached to them. If we have an arrest warrant, we can choose the date and time of issuance. Now, if we come across someone in the field who has a warrant, if it's a low-level warrant, and then we can if there's options available, we're going to take that. So today it's not given. Again, you look back at the Floyd incident specifically and look at the circumstances surrounding that, you have to question whether or not he had to go to jail that day. Then we get into the situation where force was escalated and ended in a very, very unfortunate death, and affected multiple people by the decisions of one officer and the action of 3 officers. And again, that's a long discussion about the training those officers had at the time. But again, that's another aspect of law enforcement today. If we see something going on, we're required by statute to intervene these days. And
that can get tricky.
It can. And it really is something that takes a lot, not only great recruitment, but it takes a lot of training.
Yes, it does. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Drugs, fentanyl is everywhere. And if you watch the news, it's hitting all kinds of communities. So I want you to tell me, is fentanyl affecting our community like it is some of the other communities around Texas and the United States? And what is the most prevalent drug that your officers are running into in the city of Midlothian?
So I'm glad I had the opportunity to confirm my original answer to you, and I was correct. It is domestic marijuana and THC products that we encounter the most in our city. The THC products that's used in vape pens, the marijuana that's grown and transported illegally from California or I think Colorado and other parts of the country. And the thing about what's being grown today is the quality. When we talk about quality, we're talking about the intensity of the hallucinogenic effects of marijuana are not the same plants that were being consumed back in the 60s and 70s. We're genetically improved to be stronger. And so you combine that with other narcotics, the effects are staggeringly different than it was in the 60s and 70s. And they were just combining it, with alcohol, say. We do on a large, the other very dangerous thing to our kids is the abuse of prescription drugs and counterfeit opioids. And this is something that I would not have been able to grab and talk to one of my narcotics officers. But oxycodone and hydrocodone are artificially and illegally processed. And those are the type of pills that you'll see laced with fentanyl. And I think, and not only that, as I said in our last conversation, methamphetamine is our number 2 narcotic of choice in the area. We make a tremendous amount of seizures on that in a regional setting from our narcotics task force. So we do see the stream from Mexico are fake pills laced with fentanyl. And you have to ask, why do they do that when they know it's deadly? And I don't know that we have a good answer for that. There's also an uptick in heroin and cocaine coming out of Mexico. So those are making a comeback. Again, I don't know what drives that market, depression, stress, whatever it may be. But I will tell you this, that as a result of the expense of those, when you'll see more and more of the burglaries pick up, back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and maybe late as the 80s, there were professional thieves, if you will, that would go around and make their living off of burglaries. But now it's not the same. Most of these driven by narcotics use, especially locally, where they're trading goods for narcotics or they're selling them in pawn shops and buying narcotics. So the more and more that picks up, we assume there's more and more of the abuse.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that it's happening, but it is affecting everywhere. Mm-hmm. Everywhere is being affected by these drugs and stuff that are coming up. I wanted to talk to you about another subject that is near and dear. It would be the sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of kids being trafficked. There's a lot of bad things happening. And is that something that the department is dealing with or has a special thing going on? Because I talked with Sheriff Norman when I had his interview. He was talking about a task force that they had on that. Is Midlothian kind of involved in that? What is Midlothian doing on that?
Yes. Well, there are actually two efforts. One that is being driven by a governor's endeavor at the county level, Ann Montgomery has started a board of advisors or governors that is made up of chiefs, the sheriff, and other professionals in law enforcement and child services. That is designed to, at the county level, bring awareness, cooperation between all the police departments, our social services, and the sheriff's department. The sheriff, and fortunately, we have an officer that is being transferred to a CSI task force that will focus on all types of human trafficking, labor, sex, the human trafficking that's coming out of Mexico, with just large groups of people being trafficked in by, I think the term is coyotes.
And cartels.
Yes. And so you look at that scenario a lot. And so the focus locally will be education. And the nice thing about Homeland Security Initiative that has formed a regional task force that the sheriff and I are participating in will bring their federal support and resources to Ellis County. And they have tremendous contacts, obviously, throughout not only the state, but the United States and regions that are affected by this. So as we make detentions and we make contacts, that information will be funneled to our task force officers, and we will be able to make more impactful efforts at reducing that, taking down criminal organizations that are supporting those types of efforts. And locally, in both the educational setting and other social settings, we'll be doing that kind of training at churches as much as we can, identifying the factors, the characteristics of children and even family members, or I say family member, but any person who may be trafficked and being forced to work as a laborer or any other scenario.
What can parents do, Chief, to protect their children better on something like that?
Well, there are multiple things I would tell you. One is not, we talked a lot about back in the 60s and 70s and 80s about quality time versus quantity. And I've come to believe that that's a myth. Quality time is not something that happens once a week or once a month. It's what you find on a daily basis with your child or with your family. And I think as families, whatever their makeup is, they have to be investing in their kids, and they have to know what they're involved in. Social media is an avenue for children, not only to be trafficked, but to be lured into dangerous situations. Just selling something on the internet can put you at risk these days. That's why so many of the departments have, zones where you can come and trade whatever you've sold on the Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it might be at the PD under surveillance. And so it's a very dangerous environment because you don't know who you're dealing with. Know your kids, their friends, validate that. Don't, there was, I won't tell you who used to do this, but there were people I knew back in the day who say, "Hey, I'm going to spend a night with Billy, and I'm going to spend a night with Carl," and they actually weren't at either one of those houses. And parents trust their kids so much they don't validate that. And it sounds simple, but we run across those things quite often, where an officer will make a contact with a 16, 17-year-old at 1 o'clock in the morning, and mom or dad thinks they're at Johnny's house, and no, they're in the park, or they've done something else. And being out that late, we've all said it, there's nothing good goes on after midnight. Really, it really is that way these days because of the ability to travel from city to city, the internet. You can be internet stalked, you can be engaged, and you might think you're talking to a 15-year-old, but you're talking to a 30-year-old. Hats off to the sheriff and other members of our community who have done those type of internet stings where we've set those kind of situations up. We participated in that. But I will tell you, for every one we get off the street, there's 2 or 3 more that are out there that we're looking for.
It's the ugly reality of now and these days. Chief, I'm a little over, but I wanted to ask you, and then we'll close out with a statement to the people of Midlothian. I wanted to ask you about Uvalde. in Uvalde, there was a bunch of kids massacred.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been several reviews that have come out and several videos that show delays, that show officer conduct, not just, everybody, there can be questions about situations like that. But our children, if we can't depend on the police officers to protect our children, then who could we depend on?
Correct.
So that said, in a school setting, that said, what has your department done to prepare for what can happen to anybody, a mass shooting with our children?
Well, I was in law enforcement when Columbine occurred, and I was in juvenile investigations and working with a fledgling school resource program in DeSoto, and we developed a relationship then, and with the school administration, and started exercising mass shooting scenarios. This last May, we completed a mass shooting scenario at our multi-purpose stadium there off of 14th and 287. So, those types of events, not only do we exercise that on a regular basis, but every year, Tim Hicks and other members of our school resource program and other officers have been trained in a system called Alert. And it's an active shooter scenario that's basically designed not only for the school environment, but also for business environments. We provide that training to churches. We provide that training to other community institutions. We've been to Google. We've been to Target. We've been to multiple places. We've been to Camp Blitzel and trained their staff in how to react to an active shooter. So we develop not only officers who've been trained, but trainers, experts in the field in how to respond to active shooters. Tim Hicks's position, Commander Hicks, has a dual role. Not only is he police commander for Midlothian Police Department, but he's also the safety security director for MISD. That program is about 3 years old, and so he is uniquely and intimately programmed into the safety programs of the school and trains their principals, their teachers, and creates scenarios that we exercise with staff in these types of areas. Not only active shooters, but tornado drills, the whole gamut of safety. We will continue to exercise and train the officers, but I think it takes it. One of the issues that we see in Uvalde is a failure to follow your oath, which is one of the reasons why we continue to talk about being a community servant, public servant, and that's why we take an oath. We commit at the very beginning of our career to put ourselves as peace officers in the line of fire, and comes with that the commitment to at times use deadly force, as we talked about earlier. One of the things I failed to mention was we evaluate that on a weekly basis. We also evaluate the training, whether or not the officers are using adequate types of force, whether they're timid. And in years past, we've had to make the unfortunate decision to dismiss potential officers out of training because of timidity, because of a lack of expertise with a weapon. And we're committed and will always be committed to put ourselves in the line of fire for our citizens, especially our children.
Yeah, it is. It was very maddening and sad to. Nobody wants to take another life. It's not something that's comfortable. It's not something you live with very well. But there are situations where you have to jump in, and we're called upon that in our oath. And
Sure.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen in that case. I really so thankful that you sat around here and we went over because we were covering some good information. I want you to go ahead and speak to the people in Midlothian, and we'll close out and I'll talk to you after.
The opportunity to sit and talk with our community members does not come as often as we like. There are times when we have coffee with a cop and other acronyms out there. We try to be present in our community. One of the great things about the new facility is a new community room where we hope to host quarterly meetings where we invite our community in to chat about concerns. We are part of multiple boards and community social groups throughout the organization citywide. We really want each one of our citizens to feel like we're approachable. There are going to be times we disagree. There are going to be times when they disagree with our tactics or the outcome of a police event, and those are all on the table to discuss. But at the end of the day, we're here to really serve you, serve our community to the best of our ability, and with no excuses. We understand there's a high level of expectancy, and we bear that burden gladly. And so I just encourage anyone to peruse our website, our Facebook, follow us. If you have comments, there's multiple ways to put those in print. We get routine comments from our community all the time, weekly, both asking for increased patrols, commendations on officers' good works, and there are times where they ask questions and we engage them. We will never turn away a conversation. And I would just encourage you to look at those opportunities. Citizen Police Academy is a great opportunity coming up in the fall. Scott Hughes, and our Douglas, our outreach officers, you'll know them as Batman and Captain America, are out and about in their cat cars, and they're always happy to come to an HOA or Crime Watch meeting and come by and do a safety inspection on your home. So multiple ways we're here for you.
Well, Chief, I really appreciate you serving the community and your officers, and I appreciate that you came on and answered my questions for the people of Midlothian. I hope to see you again one of these days on the show. Maybe talk about some of the new things maybe that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, and I'll see you on the other side of this. Thanks for watching, folks.